Karen, hello. Can you describe your role at PwC and your background in cyber?
Yes, so I lead PwC's digital and cyber resilience business here in the UK and also at an EMEA level. And I have the enormous privilege of helping some really iconic UK brands gear up to prepare for the eventuality of ransomware attack.
Rachel, at PwC, what's your role?
I'm an advisor to PwC on business resilience. So I get the joy of working with all of our teams to deliver outcomes for our clients in the space of business resilience.
Right. And resilience. What's not resilience, recovery. What is cyber recovery?
So cyber recovery differs enormously from traditional disaster recovery, which I think most of us have grown up being much more familiar with. And in a ransomware scenario, you're effectively working with a large number of unknowns and an incredibly large level of complexity, because you're not just recovering individual systems that may have failed, you're recovering your business. Therefore, it's very much a business-led challenge. It's not just a problem that sits within the domain of the technologists in any organization anymore. And you're working at pace under tremendous pressure to make some incredibly tough decisions without all the information you would generally wish to have.
Well, do you want to give me an example then? Talk to me about a potential scenario that you think illustrates this.
Yeah, so I'll give you a real life example. I worked very closely with a client who recovered from a ransomware scenario, and they spent 2 whole days working round the clock with all of their best people to recover the business, only to discover the ransomware attackers were still in their environment waiting to take them down again. And that's a very plausible scenario that could occur. So you're battling against time, but you're also battling to try to make sure when you're in recovery mode, you're recovering into an environment that is trusted, safe and secure, and you're not going to lose time, because time in any such scenario is obviously revenue for most of our clients.
What are the ramifications of that on people? What does it feel like when you're in that situation? It must be stressful.
Yes, anyone who has worked in a recovery scenario will understand the pressure that comes with that. And it's something where in a traditional recovery scenario, you're generally working for days under that pressure, not for weeks or months. And what we're seeing now is a real shift to very prolonged recovery scenarios where the human impact of that and the cost of that is severe, because none of us are wired and geared up to work under such sustained pressure for such prolonged periods of time. So hence the importance of rehearsing and making sure people are prepared for the potential eventuality when it comes.
Which is a good place to bring you in, Rachel. What are the most important capabilities pre, post and during an incident?
I think the most important capability pre an incident is having designed and defined your minimum viable company. And that's a subset of your business processes and outcomes that help you prevent having customers and colleagues suffer harm, help you deliver regulatory outcomes, help you avoid catastrophic commercial loss, and also build or retain trust in the marketplace. Understanding what that is ahead of time and defining it in peacetime rather than trying to understand that during the moment saves an awful lot of cognitive overload and helps you prioritise in the moment with imperfect information and very short amounts of time to make sure you recover the most important things first. Or during an incident, the critical factor is your command and control structure. So making sure that you've got very clear accountabilities, that people understand what their delegated authorities are in terms of decision making, and that you've got the right escalation and communication flows so that all of your stakeholders inside the organisation and outside the organisation understand what is the current state of affairs, what the next steps are, what the priorities are, and what the impact on the business is in terms of its normal operations. Post an incident, I think there's 2 things I would draw out. I think one is making sure that you embed the learnings, because you'll have just recovered a very large part, if not all of your business. You'll have had learnings around what went well in that process and what didn't. That needs to be fed back into your existing plans to improve them if they're ever exercised again. And the second, I would say, is making sure that you take time to really harden your environment with everything you now know in terms of vulnerabilities. Now that you've forensically inspected your entire technical environment, you also understand how well your business processes operate in a manual workaround or not. So making sure you don't finish as soon as your systems are recovered, but you continue to the end of hardening all the vulnerabilities to make sure your technical environment and your business process environment now sits within your new risk appetite, which likely will have dropped as a result of the crisis you just faced.
That sounds like a bit of thinking that's pretty modern. I wouldn't have thought many organisations have done that, have they?
No, most organisations have playbooks to recover business outcomes, assuming technology remains in place. Where the minimum viable company concept has come from is from the product ownership world, and relies on the fact that technology may well not be there. You may not be able to trust your tier 0 infrastructure foundations. You may not know you have a secure network perimeter, secure identity, secure CI/CD pipelines, or even a secure collaboration environment.
So what's the main thing that an organisation should do right at the beginning?
It's a cross-business organisational conversation that looks at what are our mission-critical outcomes, what's that 10 to 15% of everything we deliver to all our different stakeholders that we need to be able to recover very quickly to give us time to recover everything else. So it's that sort of survival life raft, essentially.
I know this is a bit of a sort of open-ended question, but what is recover quickly? What should that really mean?
Your business defines what quickly means. It's your outage tolerance. How long can your business survive without having insufferable loss across any of its outcomes? So it's a business decision on how long. Typically, it's a matter of days, not weeks or months.
And why did you choose to partner with Cohesity, Karen? What was it about this organisation that attracted you?
Cohesity is an organisation who bring phenomenal tech to address in part of the problem that we're all trying to solve here. And I think we in PwC recognise that this is not a problem that any single party is going to solve. So we all have a vested interest in protecting critical national infrastructure in the UK, protecting UK business, and therefore we've spent a long time in PwC making sure we build an ecosystem of the most effective partners to collaborate with, so we're all pulling in the same direction to help clients solve this challenge.
Now, resilience is a real buzzword at the moment. We've got a bill that's going through Parliament. What does resilience mean to you personally and professionally?
As a technology leader, resilience is incredibly important because, as Karen said, many of our incident recoveries now are taking weeks and months. So very early on in a crisis, you have to decide what your own personal resilience regime is going to be. How are you going to stay healthy and well for a sustained period of time when you've got immense pressure? You don't have the sleep you would normally have, you don't have the decompression time you would normally enjoy, you don't have the support necessarily of friends and family who you're not seeing. So for me personally, my routine includes sleeping whenever I can, eating healthily, doing yoga every morning, checking with my coach once a week, and making sure I have a conversation with a friend that doesn't involve the crisis, a couple of times a week as well, just to remember that the real world exists out there. So it's your support life raft that keeps you going. It's real intense pressure moments.
And that is during an incident, or is that a regime that you carry on irrespective of that?
It's a regime I have throughout my normal life, but I would say making sure I kept to it during the incident is what changed, and also giving my leadership team the permission to call me out if I wasn't sticking to it. That's the main difference. In normal life, you let some of your routines go every now and again when you have pressures of work, but when you're in such an intense environment for such a prolonged period of time, you need to keep to these habits to make sure that you don't suffer burnout or long-term issues.
What do you think is the one thing that you've most remembered from an incident? What is that one lesson that you've learned that you've always taken to heart?
That rehearsing BCP plans and DR plans is no longer enough. You have to be able to be confident that you can recover your tier 0 infrastructure foundations and your minimum viable company within your outage tolerances. You have to rehearse that. A BCP plan is usually for a single point event. it doesn't cope with a complex scenario that a as destructive cyber incident brings. So, yeah.
Are they always different? I mean, can you practice and practice and practice, yet presumably you are still taken by surprise?
There are qualities that are always different. However, if you rehearse them many times, you will have covered the most likely scenarios. Also, your people will have built the sort of muscle memory and the emotional memory of working under pressure together, making decisions with imperfect information and making critical decisions when information is changing around them. And that is incredibly valuable in any kind of future crisis, even if it's slightly different from the ones you've rehearsed.
Okay, now, this is a world that's changing and changing and changing, isn't it, Karen? And, you know, we've had ransomware attacks. Everybody sees these ransomware attacks as just attempts to get money, but they're getting a lot more dangerous, aren't they? I can remember interviewing the acting American cybersecurity czar, and she said that there are going to be attacks on hospitals. And so there's more to it now, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think that's why, as an organisation working with the likes of Cohesity as partners here, we're really focused on helping clients to prepare for this type of eventuality, because in many cases it's not just revenue at risk, it could very plausibly be lives at risk. And I don't think anyone wants to see that eventuality happen in this country. But the threat landscape continues to evolve at pace. We continue to keep abreast of it, but these are very, very real risks that are not diminishing, they're continuing to increase. So really understanding what's at stake beyond, there's a lot at stake: revenue, actual solvency of your business if you're underprepared. But lives, I think, for me, is the paramount that we're all collectively keen to protect. And
we have actually already seen an attack where people's lives were actually put at threat because it was an attack on a hospital.
Yeah, and when we see the demographic of some of these attackers, I think some of these are still kids. They quite probably don't necessarily understand the impact of their actions.